I mean, I had one guy. I hadn't been out very long. I thought they stole a truck, and they both had a bunch of warrants. They were really drunk, and he wasn't going to go. And so he took out a knife, and he just didn't realize I saw the knife, and he hid the knife under his hand. I don't know if he's going to stab me with it or not.
This segment of DoD TV is brought to you by Leupold, American to the core.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild Podcast. It's powered by DeerCast.
You're Tim Chelsvik.
You're Matt Drury, and you're powered by venison.
Well, a lot of sugar lately.
Yeah. We got a box of cookies yesterday in the studio. The box is practically gone. There were a lot of cookies in there.
Well,
did you finish it off this morning?
No, I didn't finish it off this morning, but I took
neighbor kids
several home.
Oh, okay.
I have kids, Tim.
Did they make it home or?
They made it home,
okay.
Surprisingly, because I went to the farm yesterday and did some work up there, and then headed home after that. And I kept looking at it in the passenger seat. It's like, put a seatbelt around.
Yeah, you should have put it in the back seat.
Yeah, well,
I can say this from experience.
I didn't touch it. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Look at you.
Until I got home.
You want to eat with the kids.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well, so we've got a special guest today that we'll get to in a little bit. We're going to be talking to a conservation agent, Andy Barnes.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting conversation because, as you think about law enforcement, you think about conservation agents and game wardens, pretty much probably the greater majority of people that they interact with have weapons. You just think about just what that does for the dynamic and everything, and so I'm curious to hear his perspectives.
Tough job, certainly, and I don't think they get the credit they deserve in a lot of respects. You always think about that the same way with police officers. I feel like it's like you see a cop on the side of the road. It's like, am I speeding?
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
you're throwing bags out the window.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so I think they have a tough job, and I look forward to talking to Andy and just kind of hearing some of the stories he has and some of the war stories. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I should let folks know. I've always struggled with trying to find a way to prepare deer ribs. It seems like there's a fair amount of meat there, and I've just never been sometimes I'll go through and I'll cut out the individual slats, but there's always a lot, especially late season.
What do you do with that then? Throw it in like a slow cooker? Or?
Exactly. That's and I spell that Zackly. Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Internet speak. I have ground it before, but I love ribs, like beef ribs, pork ribs. So I had my buddy, I asked him to cut some chops out of a doe that I shot and gave him. And he gave me kind of half the spine and the ribs all joints. It was
interesting.
Throw
that in a slow cooker.
I was it was pretty big. I pulled it apart and I cut the back straps off of it essentially, but I still had the little ribs. And I went through and I cut them up individually and threw them in an air fryer. And I put some barbecue seasoning on there, and I waited to put barbecue sauce on until after the fact. I put them in for 8 minutes.
Wait, from being raw?
Yeah.
Okay.
8 minutes in an air fryer, magic happens when you hit the power button on those things. And they came out looking toasty brown, and I hit them with some barbecue sauce. They were delicious. Even the fat, deer fat is usually not good. There was still some fat on these. The fat soaked up the flavor of the barbecue seasoning and the sauce, and there was just enough meat on there to make it worth my while. I stood over the kitchen sink and just it was awesome.
So you lost me when you said you did this at home and you didn't do it here at the studio.
Oh,
I mean,
you got jealous.
You made it sound like it wasn't that hard to do, and here we don't have any here.
It was. I'm trying to understand, Tim. Help me understand. Why are we not eating this also? I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. I was like, this is kind of an experience. I've never done any kind of venison in an air fryer, and it was super simple.
I kind of also question your palate sometimes and wonder if we have the same level of expectations of food. I love venison, but I mean, you, without ever trying this, and you aren't offering any, you're just talking about it. I have no idea, Tim.
Well, I mean, I can't blame you. Lunch yesterday was a can of tuna with some torn up flour tortilla.
I offered to crumble some of those cookies into it, though.
You did, yeah. You're helpful.
Thank you. Meet your macros.
Right. So that's your killing it in the kitchen tip for today.
Now I know.
Throw the venison in the air fryer.
Tim is selfish. All right. Don't touch my iPad. Don't touch the soundboard. All right, we probably got to welcome some new Rack Pack members. If you aren't a part of the Rack Pack, all you got to go is to Facebook, search Dre Outdoors, 100% Wild Rack Pack.
Yep. And then every time we do this, we always throw in one fake name. Like this person is not legit.
I saw one of the guys, the
doctor?
Yeah, the doctor.
Dr. LC, I think.
Yeah, he jumped in the...
He's a legit doctor.
He is.
He's a doctor of chiropractic, I think. That's
right. Yeah.
So maybe he can figure out why I'm asymmetric.
All right, so new Rack Pack members, Sam Hartwick, Wayne Gryan. Hey, I know Wayne.
Do you?
Yeah. So Wayne, his nickname is Bubba.
Okay.
And he dated my oldest sister, Kim, like 30 years ago. 20, 30 years ago, yeah.
He could have been your brother-in-law.
He used to work for Mark in Columbia when Mad Calls was in Columbia. He was going to Mizzou.
Okay.
And he was working for Mark
out
there and was one of the first Mad Calls employees.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he still likes us enough to listen to the show.
I guess. So welcome aboard, Bubba. All right. Cody Thompson, Eugene Beekler, Miranda Drury, fake. That's fake news. There's no way she's following. That's my wife. There's no way she's following the Rack Pack. Did you throw that in as a fake one? Okay. Gavin Hutchinson, Michael Cook, Matt McIntosh. All right, she's the fake one.
We can both agree on that.
Yeah, there's no way. She's not following this. She has no care in the world about this podcast.
Oh, you have a podcast at work, honey?
What we do in general. So that was the easiest fake name you've given me so far.
Nailed it.
All right. I was able to pronounce it, too.
Yeah, you got it. Miranda. And then over on Apple Podcasts, we got a 5-star rating, which we love, by the way. It really helps us out. From Cody Sudbeck. He says, great podcast. It's a good combo of laughs and info. Definitely my favorite podcast. Ooh. We're not supposed to be anyone's favorite podcast.
Oh, we're not your favorite podcast, but...
I mean, we'll read the rest of the review just the same. He says, keep up the amazing work.
Hold it.
Did we just become best friends? Yep.
Man.
All right.
Cody's going to ruin our reputation.
Just share the news, Cody.
All right. Well, let's bring on Agent Andy Barnes from the Missouri Department of Conservation. Andy, thank you for hopping on with us today.
You bet. Thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks for sitting through that first 5 minutes, too.
No, that's good.
Are you in the Rack Pack, Andy?
No, to be honest, I'm not. So
okay, well.
Might have to join.
You're not missing anything, but a lot of shenanigans.
Yep, that's right. So Andy, maybe take us back and give us a little bit of your history of how you ended up being a conservation agent. Okay,
well, I'm actually originally from Arkansas, so you can't dog me too much on the hogs. But for me, I was born and raised in Arkansas. To be honest, I probably would have been back in Arkansas, but my wife and I went to school up at MSU in Springfield, and I was a year ahead of her in school, so I was applying, was going to go back to Arkansas, but they wouldn't transfer all of her credits back to Arkansas, so I ended up applying up here and got in, and so I ended up staying up here in Missouri instead of Arkansas. But that was a little bit about how I got started up here. Really, it's just like anybody else's background. For me, that's really all I knew is to be outdoors, and I want to do some type of service, some type of law enforcement, and it was really just a marriage of two of the best sides to it. And so that's really what I did, was pick law enforcement that was going to be where I could serve, but yet I could be outdoors when I did it. So that's really why I became an agent.
So once you become an agent, I mean, realistically, do you get much time as far as the hunting side of things, or does that kind of go out the window because that's your busiest time of year is hunting season?
Well, I mean, personally, I think we have a bunch of myths about what game wardens do, and a little bit about that is that you can never hunt and fish again, and that's not true. I mean, we have time off the same as everybody else. Sometimes we don't take it as good as we should, that we should take that time off. But if you look at it, really, it depends around the state. my busiest time is probably in the summertime, not in the fall.
Why is that?
The fall we have more phone calls, because it's that hunting generated phone calls, night hunting, even deer car accidents and stuff like that. So I'll have probably a higher number of calls in the fall, but my enforcement is much heavier in the summer. But I mean, I'm in southern Missouri. We have a lot of float streams, a lot of fishing activity. And so that summertime activity generates way more enforcement activity than deer season for me. But if I was in North Missouri, deer season would be quite a bit heavier than me. So that's what it is.
So in the summer, you're talking about like the streams and things that the kind of the float trips are what's famous in southern Missouri, I feel like. Yeah. And so what is it? A lot of just underage drinking, or is it a lot of fishing related? I mean, what is it that you're doing on the stream side of it?
On the stream side, like you said, southern Missouri has those clear rocky streams, and we have a lot of float stream, what we term a float stream. And so a lot of it is not necessarily fishing. They will do fishing, and we'll check some fishing stuff while we're out there. But like I said, a lot of it's the young people that are just floating on the river, and it's recreational. And there'll be some underage drinking. There's a considerable amount of drugs, and just basically you're kind of corralling the crowd, just keeping them, making it downriver to the end is really what it is.
Sounds like a horrible part of the job, to be honest with you. I've been on a few float trips, and I can't imagine the kind of the unruly nature of that crowd of people by the end of the float. It's one thing in the beginning, but by the middle and end, I can't imagine how many clowns you're dealing with.
Yeah, you're about right. The later in the day it gets, the worse it gets. By about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, half of them aren't even in a boat. They're just stumbling down the river. And if we'll just get to the end, we're happy.
Canoe upside down, lost the cooler, no shirt, just flip flops.
I am curious, like, what's the craziest situation you've had to enforce or come across on the river like that?
Boy, I don't know. There's some that I probably can't say on the podcast.
No one's listening, so
there's been several on the river, and it depends on the river, and it depends on the time. The hotter it gets, seems like it gets worse. But the one I can remember, I think it might have been Memorial Weekend, which is a big weekend for us. Mm-hmm. And it ended up being all day long. It was pretty busy. We were making a lot of arrests that day, and there was an agent that was working with me. He's actually my supervisor now, but he's about 6'4" and 240, and I'm like 5'10" and 160, so I'm quite a bit smaller than him. And everybody we contacted for some reason kept saying, well, why can't we just swim away? What if we just took off and didn't come back to the bank? And I didn't realize it, but he kept telling everybody, well, you see that little guy over there? Well, he would tell him I was a track star or all-American swimmer or something like that. All day long, I didn't think nothing of it, but at the end, there's a spot that it's a large bluff, and we'd have somebody on top of the bluff just watching the crowd floating down. We'd be down at the bottom of the bluff, basically shepherding them back over to us if we need to make contact with them. But the amount of time that we could see them and they'd see us and we need to bring them over was fairly short. Well, pretty soon we had about 2 or 3 rafts load of college kids there. I don't remember what they had, some dope or something, but we were dealing with them, and they were mouthing us a little bit about, well, we shouldn't have even stopped. We should have just kept going. You couldn't have done anything. And I heard him tell them, well, you see that guy? He's an all-American swimmer. I just tell him go, and he'll jump in. Well, about that time, they called out 3 canoes that we need to talk to. Some drugs or something. Well, they weren't as nice of people. Well, they made it within our view, and we were waving at them to come on over. They weren't coming. So they put the paddles down and they started going, and they used some choice words. So I didn't really have any options. So I dove off the bluff and started swimming after him in uniform.
Oh man.
And so I caught the first canoe. He started coming back to the bank, and I got to the second canoe. To be honest, the guy in the back who was mouthing us pretty hard, he raised the paddle like he was going to crack me with the paddle. And I told him, you better not, because we're going to go one way or the other. And I was able to get a hold of the canoe and got them to the bank. The third one, they just got away. But we got them to the bank. Well, when I got there, all those college kids were like, oh, my God, I didn't know you were serious. We're not moving, sir. We're right here. But So that was one of the ones I always remember.
That's pretty funny.
That's how he got the nickname Spider Monkey. He went after him.
That's not easy to swim in your full gear either. I mean,
yeah, about the only time I ever swam down a canoe. But I've had some foot pursuits and vehicle pursuits, never one that I had to swim down. But that was the first one.
That's a pretty good one.
That to me has got like, it's just got to be so surreal to be like chasing down a person. Like, we're not playing tag. I have to.
Well, the surreal part is the stakes that you don't know what they may do. I mean, that's a nervous, feeling, I'm sure, on their part, but I'm sure a little bit of adrenaline takes over and the training takes over and all that. But still, I mean, you never know what the other person's going to do.
Yeah, the stakes are so high. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been pursuing someone and they've brandished a weapon at you?
Not very much. Most of the ones that I've chased, I mean, they're just trying to get away. I mean, I've been pretty lucky. I've been on foot pursuits where they brandished weapon against somebody else, but not directly at me. I had one, actually, I just got out of the academy, and I've been on 16 years. When we came out, we were basically told either you're going to be fired or dead within the first 6 months. I mean, you basically thought, well, I'm only going to last about 6 months at this, but it was just old school training, but
Mark
I had a guy
when I started here.
He said Mark Drury told him.
Yeah, but I had one guy, I hadn't been out very long. I thought they stole a truck, and they both had a bunch of warrants. They were really drunk, and he wasn't going to go. And so he took out a knife, and he just didn't realize I saw the knife, and he hid the knife under his hand. I don't know if he's going to stab me with it or not. At that point, he charged me, and I had pulled my pistol, and so that stopped it. But he threw the knife away. He never did use it on me. But I've been on pursuits before that they had. Actually, the agent to the south of me, we were chasing a guy 2 or 3 years ago, and he found him, and I had lost him in the brush. Well, the guy had a knife on his side, big knife, like a sheath knife, and he told him to drop that knife. The guy just had a bunch of warrants, and he actually opened up the barbed wire fence, said, "Come on through the fence," but dropped that knife first. He pulled the knife out and then threw it at the horror officer, missed the officer. That was a mistake, because this officer, he does that jujitsu like 7 days a week, hits the gym 5 days a week. He ran him down. And, yeah, it wasn't good. So
he threw the knife like I'm a ninja. I'm gonna throw this at you.
Yeah. I mean, it was a big knife, but he missed him. But I guess he thought he could throw him like a throwing axe or a knife, where he was going to try to hit the officer with the knife.
It's like when Mr. Burns goes to release the hounds and they won't come, and he's like, Homer's just standing there. He's like, any second now, like it just didn't work.
Well, the thought process, the type of person you're dealing with that thinks, okay, here's my shot. I'm going to take it, when obviously the officer would have weapons, and you know what I mean? Like just numbskulls. I mean,
yeah, because then okay, so your attempt to kill me didn't work. Now we still have to communicate.
I was going to say, yeah, what kind of charges does the guy get then? Because would that be attempted murder if he's throwing a knife at the agent?
Yeah, we charged him with assault on a law enforcement. He ended up going to prison over it, and so he's out now. Actually, he's been stealing some cars last time I heard. But,
I'm sure he's on the catalytic converter ring that they just busted in Farmington. Yep. Did you hear it? That's like $1 million, one of the biggest rings in the country.
Someone was doing that to my neighbor's truck years ago, and it sounded like someone was like hosing down a water, like a garbage can at 1:00 in the morning. And I looked out the window, and I see light and sparks coming from underneath my neighbor's truck. I called him up. I was like, "Are you working on your?" He's like, "No, I'm not." I was like, Someone is. And they were under there with a blowtorch cutting away at his catalytic converter.
So, Andy, when you guys are out in the field like this, and I'm always curious, I think, this is the number, who knows what the number really is, but I would think like 99% of outdoorsmen and women are probably, law-abiding citizens that I don't think intentionally are making any, they're not trying to break the rules, right? and you give me a better percentage if that's inaccurate, but that 1% or whatever the percentage is that are intentionally going out there and they're breaking the rules and they're hiding things or they're doing things that they know they shouldn't be. I mean, I know in Dad's area in North Missouri there was a couple. It always seems like a lot of times it's local people and it's kids a lot of times. It seems like that. I know there's plenty of adults that are getting wrapped up in these things as well, but it's like when you run into a situation like that, like I'm thinking of one particular case where they poached on several people's property, these kids. They killed, I think, a bald eagle. I mean, they were shooting, protected birds, and they were doing things that obviously they were just doing shit they shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah.
But in general, what percentage would you say are that you issue tickets to are law-abiding citizens that just messed up, like honest mistake type stuff, or they're intentionally going out there knowing they're breaking the laws and they're really out there, doing some bad stuff?
Well, I think you hit on. I think you're about pretty accurate. They track our compliance rate, but then that's maybe a little bit more difficult to track because, like you said, we're different than other law enforcement. If you're stopped by a trooper, because you mentioned it earlier, just the sight of an officer on the side of the road will make you hit the brakes. Yeah. I do it even in my state truck.
Yeah.
But we're different than other ones. You look at another officer, if they stopped you, you've already committed some type of violation. And so 100% of their contacts are violation driven, while 95% of ours are completely legal. They haven't done anything. We just need to stop and talk to them to see, if everything's going right. So I would say 5% of them have committed a violation, or 10% maybe. Mm-hmm. But even though 10% might have created or caused a violation, but there's only a small percentage of those that probably intentionally did it. Now, I wouldn't say intentionally might be a little different, because what we're looking at is, you can unintentionally break the law by speeding, because you're just not paying attention. But can you unintentionally just not buy a permit or shoot the wrong animal? You can forget maybe. You should have checked your permit before you left, something like that. And so it might be a little different, but, out of those 10% that have a violation, we're only going to write a very small amount of those, just because a lot of those are small violations, or maybe we can just educate them into not doing it again. Sure. And a lot of it's just some good person that's out there that just made a mistake, and we don't need to punish them by writing them a citation. But,
yeah, I think when we read through the guidelines each year, and you look at it, and there's some small changes from year to year that might happen. And I think of things that might trip people up and that cause debate among friend groups. You're texting each other and you're snapping a picture of the booklet and you're saying, well, it says this. And it's like, you're trying to interpret the law yourself because it's not crystal clear. I mean, do you feel like there are sometimes in the rule books that's just like, man, there is a little gray area here, and whether it's by design or not, it leaves a percentage of confusion to the hunters at home that are like, well, I want to do the right thing, but I'm not real sure what this law's saying. I think of Hunter Orange rules as a good one, and Hunter Orange rules during all the different seasons, and the late season and the youth seasons. And I mean, my understanding of it is if there's firearms seasons happening and you're archery hunting, you have to wear orange during those seasons, but I don't think it's that cut and dry necessarily. And I'm just talking about Missouri here because that's what I'm most familiar with. Can you kind of take us through that and take us through an individual conservation agent's understanding of that law and that little bit of gray area that might be there? Like, what happens when that gray area, I guess, do you have to report to your superior officer and ask him, okay, how do you define this, or how does that work?
No, we do a pretty good job of trying to reevaluate the regulations every year. They go through it all every year, and that we'll get some of those gray areas that pop up. And some of it is that breakdown between, the protection branch trying to formulate some of these rules and having to tweak them, having to fix it to close up some loophole somewhere, or to make it easier to understand. And so we have to do that. And then it might be that breakdown between us and then going into print, or, pushing it into law that we really didn't intend for it to sound like that. Or, it was a breakdown of communication. And we usually try to fix those from year to year. But as far as what you said before, we usually use a lot of discretion. If it's something that we know is a gray area, that usually comes from the top down. They'll just say, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is kind of our guidance. This is what we're going to go with. And so with all new laws, you're going to have some miscommunication. And we can usually tell that in the field too. Even if it's an established law, if you think the person just misunderstood it, we're not going to necessarily write a citation over that. We would just explain it to them at that point.
Sure.
But we don't have to. We really don't write very many citations. And so, as far as that in the field, we don't normally call somebody to get somebody else's opinion. We just make the call on our own. But if it's something established, like you said, it's a gray area that has popped up, we usually have some guidance that comes from up top that's going to say, hey, this is what we're going to do this year until we can get it fixed.
Sure.
Someone asked a great question in the Missouri Conservationist, I think, in the January edition, which is a great magazine. If people don't, if you're a resident of Missouri, you can get it for free. If you live outside the state of Missouri, you can get it for like $1 an edition. But they asked a question like, what if I do late season and I shoot a buck that I think is a doe, it's already shed, it's got no antlers, it's a mature buck, so it's not a button buck. What do I do? And I was like, good question. Yeah. And the guidance was you tag it as a buck and you list 0 points.
Well, here's a question. What if you have already killed your limit on bucks for the year, antlerless deer?
You don't have an
antler deer, any deer.
Yeah.
Sorry, and you don't have a buck tag left, and you were out there trying to harvest your doe population. I could see where something like that would happen potentially. In that scenario, would you? Obviously, I guess you would have to call your agent. Would you get a ticket in that scenario because you don't actually have a tag for a antlered buck?
Yeah, if it doesn't have any antlers on it, no. Like you said, if you had something that popped up and you just made the mistake. But how would you have known? It would have been pretty tough for you to be able to see it unless it was close enough you could see those spots on its head where the antlers had fell off or something. But no, that's exactly right. Just call your local agent and just say, hey, this is what I got. What do you want me to do? And to be honest, we might have to ask. Because there's a lot of times people will call me and say, I'll just tell them, you know what, I'll call you back. And so, I'll either have to look it up or, let's get some guidance. You didn't do anything wrong. We just need to make sure that you're tagging it the way we need to have it tagged so that we have it captured in our system.
I got a question for you. And this happens from time to time. So say you shoot an animal, shoot a deer, say on Monday, and it's not an ideal hit. You track a little bit, you push the deer, so you have to wait. And all of a sudden, it's the next day when you finally find him. Which day, when you go to tag the deer right away and you go to check it in, is it technically killed the day you recovered him or the day that you shot him?
Well, and it's been a while since I looked at it. I think the system automatically assigned the day that you call it in, or check it in. But I've always told people you will check it on the permit of what you essentially killed it on. Mm-hmm. So I probably get 2 or 3 of those every year. I tell them, hey, you harvested it with a rifle. It's just now back into archery season. You'll check it with your rifle tag. And because you just didn't recover it till the next day, but that's the method that you had used. And so, right or wrong, that's what I've always told people. And the system will take it. You can go ahead. I get people that check deer on turkey tags and all kinds of stuff. The system will take it. and then it'll just pop up that, it was tagged on the wrong tag or whatever. But so that's the only difference is, you can go ahead and use the method that you or the tag that you use that method for, and it's just the next day. So.
Got it.
Sure. What are some of the common violations that you see, whether intentional or unintentional, on the part of whitetail hunters?
A lot of it right now is going to be the most common one would probably be a permit violation, just because that it's one of the ones that we can discover fairly easily. We'll get a little bit of hunter orange, but most people are pretty good about wearing hunter orange. And then as far as the most common, though, it used to be landowner permits. We had some landowner stuff, but really we made some changes in the regulations, and the violation rate dramatically dropped, which was good. And so, but it would probably be permits would be your number one violation. And then you get into those more serious violations like shooting from the road or spotlighting or something like that.
Sure.
Those probably are occurring. Whether we're catching those is a different story. The permit ones are easier to track, easier to find.
Yeah.
So that's why I'd say more common.
The convenience of the app is so nice. Like
it really is.
It's nice, and you can go back through. You can see your telecheck history. Although sometimes I get a little skeeved out, like when I'm about to go out hunting, I'm thinking, I could use a few more does for the freezer. And so I'll go through and buy like maybe a couple doe tags for that day. And then I kill them. I kill a couple does that night. And I'm thinking, oh, man, I wonder if anyone's like looking at this and seeing the time of when I bought these. And then I happen to check 2 in that night. And like, is someone looking at me to see like, oh, this guy's buying tags after he's killing deer? Like it just kind of freaks me. But the place I hunt is there's so many does that's not an uncommon scenario.
Well, I'm sure if you bought the tag at night, I'm sure that comes up in the system. I mean, but if you're buying them early in the day, I'm sure that happens all the time where people are on their way to the hunt and they're like, oh crap, I forgot. Like the Missouri, that app is really convenient.
It is, yeah.
It's a very nice tool, and actually it gives you service in places that I'm shocked I get service to check a deer before you move it and all that, because it makes it so easy. Back in the day when you'd have to telecheck, it was a whole thing to remember to call the number, because you had till like 10 p.m. or whatever it was, and call the number and get your confirmation number or telecheck ID and all that stuff. Now, like, it's still a 2-step process, but you can do it all at once. Like as soon as I get on the, find the deer, I do the entire process so I don't forget something later on. It's super simple. It's pretty convenient. I wish all states went to that system, specifically Illinois, which is
they don't have one.
It's very difficult. Their system in general of getting tags, and it's not easy, but they have that draw, and you know what I mean? Missouri's over the counter, so it's a little easier to have that app, but Illinois is pretty confusing.
Illinois be tripping.
So we just went off on a tangent here.
Sorry. Started bashing on Illinois, my home state, which makes it fair game.
Yeah, there you go.
I can do that.
I love the resource. You know what
Beautiful
I mean? Been hunting there. I killed my first deer there when I was 15. I've hunted there, but I've spent a lot of money there and not killed a lot of stuff. It's
donating.
Pretty costly. But you're talking about the Missouri app. When you look through there, I got so many unchecked tags because I didn't kill anything.
Donation.
But honestly, that is the way I look at it. I know some people scoff at the price of these things, but in Missouri, it's really cheap.
$7 doe tag.
So when I go in, I usually buy several tags all at once, and I'm set for the season. I don't have to worry about it. And it's honestly, I just look at it as a donation to the resource. That brings me to another topic, which there's probably a little bit outside of your comfort level, because I know it probably comes from Jefferson City, but I feel like I know several people from within the industry, so to speak, that give, their Missouri residents and give Missouri Conservation Department such a hard time about how it's managing the resources, and whether it's, reintroducing elk, but yet our turkey population's, kind of waning here. And I feel personally like it's kind of unjust. It's like CWD gets a bad rap because there's a lot of money being spent there. Of course, the elk thing reintroduction took a lot of money. And I know, hey, there's a lot of turkey hunters and that population's not doing great. But in general, I think the department is doing a great job of making sure we have all types of resources to enjoy, and that our woods and waters are, plentiful. There's a lot of conservation ground to be able to hunt in the state of Missouri, and good ground too. So, I mean, in your opinion, Andy, what do you feel like is maybe one of the biggest misnomers about how the department is handling a certain, species or a certain, whether it be CWD or elk introduction or turkey population? Like, how do you feel? We get these surveys every year, and I'm sure a lot of people fill those out and turn them in. What do you guys do with that information, and do you act upon it?
I think we certainly use all the information. I think you're right that we get some criticism in certain categories, but we're not going to be able to please everybody. And I think you're right that I look at it as there's just such a wide array of species out there, whether it's a game species or there's non-game animals that still have to be managed, and that you still have to promote habitat improvement or whatever for those species. But it's not that hook and bullet crowd. It's not that crowd it's not a consumptive use. But do we just not spend any money on them or not work on those? So I think that we get some rap that, hey, why aren't you doing more? Like you said, the turkey population, it's going downhill, and we're seeing that it's going downhill. Lots of states are seeing that it's going downhill. But I know that we're ramping up some studies with turkeys right now. We're starting to put some more money into this that we are already investing in. But now we're looking at different dynamics, looking at predators. How are predators influencing it? But yet, if you're going to expend all that effort, like CWD, if you're expending this monumental effort into CWD or feral hogs or something, well, that's going to pull it from somewhere else. And I do have comments from the public at times. They'll say, hey, well, don't you think that this would be something you need to be looking into? Like one the other day at a meeting was black vultures, because black vultures will predate upon calves from time to time. It's a very small percentage, but yet it can happen. But the question I had is why are we not tracking the numbers of damage on black vultures? Well, we might be. I'm not sure if we are or not, but we can't track everything. And like you said, if we're going to spend this money on CWD or manpower or whatever on CWD, then it's going to pull it from somewhere else. And so I think that if we are getting a bad rap on some of those specific species, we're probably still working on them, but we had to pull resources to work on something else. It's not a never-ending amount of money or personnel. But like you said, those surveys, I know that they track them. As agents, we do surveys every year on various species, and it's the same survey every year, and the biologists are using that data to determine season length and bag limits and all of that. So they're using it. We just probably don't see it on the front end as much.
That survey is lengthy. Did you get one this year yet?
Yeah.
It's a long, you better sit down and take some time. It takes a long time to get all the way through that. So, I'm sure that's a good thing, but I often wonder if they could break that into categories or break that, because there's some things that I just have no knowledge of, admittedly. So, it's like
English language.
Very much the English language, yes. But, and there's questions about it, and you almost feel bad filling the survey out because I'm not informed necessarily on every single topic.
Sure.
And so I hate to, for something I'm putting down, affect it in one way or the other and not the correct way. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I don't know, just a piece of feedback on that end of it. The survey's good, but it may need to be broken down into sections.
Chunks.
Yeah.
Chunk it out.
So,
Andy, a question for you as it relates to like your contacts with folks in the field. Like if someone's, maybe they're rifle hunting, maybe they got a shotgun. What is the best way as a hunter to make your job a little easier to make that contact? Because you've got two people with firearms. I just think like, how can we make that as easy and safe as possible?
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. And we get that quite a bit. my deal is just follow directions, and I see it. Sometimes people are super nervous, and I mean they're giving off cues, and to me, I'll get misled. I'll be thinking something's going on here more than what's going. No, it's just they're just super nervous, and so I would say number one is just follow directions, and so a lot of our contacts they haven't done anything wrong, and nothing's going to happen from it, but. If I contact you, I typically will have them unload their firearm if it's something I need to check their firearm. So I'll ask them to unload it, but then I've also had them point it right at me to start unloading it. And so you have to tell them, hey, let's point it that direction away from us, and you just turn your back to us. Go ahead and unload your gun. And same way. I'll have them for some reason, if I have to walk across the field to them, if they're deer hunting, I've had them look through their scope at me, which I really don't want to walk across 100 yards with you staring at me through a deer rifle. But, it's just basic sense of, let's point the muzzle in a safe direction when we're unloading or loading. And I typically prefer to get the business done ahead of time. So, let's do it first. So I'll ask you to either load or unload your firearm. And then I'll inspect your firearm, inspect your permits, check any wildlife that you might have. And that's all I'm asking. We don't all need to unload our guns at the same time. And we also don't need to dump all the birds out on the ground at the same time. So a lot of times, if it's a 15 bird bag limit, you can just open the bag. If you only have 3, I can count to 3. You don't have to dump them on the ground. So just following directions, and, just after we get done with the business part, we can talk all day. So that's what I typically do.
So down in the area that you're at, I mean, is waterfowl, is that probably a little more predominant than, say, whitetails, and I'm sure turkey to an extent? I mean, what would be like the busiest? You said summer was the busiest. So is that, I know the streams and all that, but is there a lot of fishing and, that type of stuff that you're having to check, if they have the proper licenses and those types of things?
Yeah, I get a lot of fishing. I don't have a lot of waterfowl where I'm at. I just don't have enough water for it. Some upland bird, turkey, deer. Deer's a big season for me, but it's just not as big as that spring and summertime where, because we have some lakes that are right around us, Table Rock and Stockton. And so fishing season is something that we spend quite a bit of time with, just because the amount of people that are out there. I might check 100 fishermen in a day, but only one deer hunter in a day. So I mean, it's just that size. So.
What have been some of your favorite excuses people have given you when maybe there is a violation and they're trying to skirt it?
My dog ate my tag.
How'd that walleye jump into my buns?
I don't know. You can usually tell pretty quick. I mean, I typically will ask, do you have any fish on board? Because, you'll start with, hey, just conservation agent, just here to talk to you for a second. Do you have your permits? And you can tell about the second sentence, they're probably going to have something short on board, just because you can see they'll almost physically walk away from the item. It's just a psychological thing. They just want to distance them away from that live well. And so then it's kind of fun, because then you want to kind of prolong it a second. And then finally you're just going to say, hey, do you have any fish on here? And then they'll just say, you can see that pot. Yeah. And I mean, I've had a couple times they'll look at it and then it goes overboard. They're like, oh, sorry. So I typically just ask them, did you measure that? And then they'll say, oh yeah. And I mean, I've had them say that, oh yeah, it's good. It's good. And it is absolute. I mean, it's 4 inches short. It's not even remotely close. So, but
whoops,
there's all kinds of excuses.
Can't do that with a deer.
No.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, to me, I think it would be almost, I don't know, maybe I'm overextenuating this, but like, I think of people that work at the Walmart customer service desk, that they just get lied to all day long. Like, yeah, I bought this $30 steak and I ate 3/4 of it and it's not good. I want to bring it back. Or like, it would be hard, at least in my perspective, to not get jaded from just kind of being
the BS.
Yeah, just that being kind of the default. Does that happen?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I try not to be jaded. I'm usually a pretty happy person most of the time. But I tell people, I openly tell them, I've done it 16 years and I check a lot of people. I could probably count on one hand the amount of people that just told me the truth straight up front. If I rolled up and they said, yep, I did it, it probably only happened easily less than 10 out of all of them in 16 years. But I've also told people, if you tell me the truth straight up front, I'm going to show you probably a lot more leeway than if you had to make me work for it. But you get a little jaded, and it's a natural tendency for people to not tell you the truth. If you ask a trooper, they'll do the same thing. If you say, hey, do you know the reason I stopped you? And they automatically look at their speedometer. But I wasn't going that fast. It's just natural psychology that they'll do that. But,
in those instances, when you get pulled over, you just get your license, get your insurance, just have it at the window and ready. Like, they got a job to do. I deserved this.
Yeah, let's not extenuate this.
Not saying I have any experience.
Matt, you're a fast driver, sir.
No. Moving along.
We should probably help our buddy Josiah with today's question of the day.
All right. The question of the day is proudly brought to you by Sportsman's Channel, your home for Winchester and Drury's natural born and everything red, wild, and blue.
Hey guys, this is Josiah Smith. I'm from Cumberland Furnace, Tennessee. I'm 14 years old, and this is my second year of hunting, and I hunt on private access properties. I've got a couple places, but many, many times I've gained access to spots and lost access before the season even started. I have this one spot that gained access, and the lady ended up changing her mind because she was worried about an accident happening and her getting sued. I'm just wondering if you think it's a good idea if I came back this next year offering a hold harmless agreement so that she would not be liable for the accident. Just curious on your advice. I'm not really sure what to do. So thanks.
It's a good question. I don't mean to laugh. I'm laughing because it's like, it's almost there will be an accident. Here's this. So you got to watch how you phrase that, certainly. Yeah. But the American Hunting Lease Association, like, this is what they specialize in. So that came to mind instantly. They have policies just for this that protect the landowner and give them that peace of mind. And it's funny that's his question, because yesterday I was at the new property that I just purchased, and there's a piece next to it that I would like to lease, and they don't hunt there, and but at some point they did. There's blinds, like old handmade blinds on it, and I thought to myself, I wonder, it's an older couple, they're 87 years old, they live here in the St. Louis area, and I thought, I wonder what my approach should be, because I don't want to scare them. And certainly at that age, I'm sure they're thinking, like, I don't want any, I don't want any accidents, or it's not worth it. So, it's like, how do you go cold turkey into that conversation? And I was asking Mark about it, and he was like, a lot of times I just go and say, hey, I'm your new neighbor, or it's a little different for Josiah because he's looking to lease a property or whatever. But in this instance, he said, hey, I would like to look after your place for you. If you ever need anything, I'm here for you. And that can be a foot in the door. So I thought that was a good way to look at it, certainly.
Definitely. And Josiah, it's his second year of deer hunting. He's 14 years old. He's thinking about
smart
liability. I mean, that's awesome. First off, congratulations and welcome to the family of hunters. That's cool that you joined up. But yeah, hopefully, like, definitely check out the American Hunting Lease Association. I'll put the link in the show notes. But I would think if you're 14 years old and you come back to this lady with, like, hey, I understand your perspective, I want to make sure that you're covered, that's got to speak volumes. Like, that could be the beginning of a really long-term opportunity to hunt that piece of ground.
And by him telling her he's willing to put in the work, and if she needs help, around the property or cleaning up, fixing fences or whatever the case may be. I mean, that goes a long way, for someone being a little more comfortable with you being on their property. And it's one thing, it's hard to understand it until you own a piece of property or own a home or own something where you have that innate ownership of this object, and you have a real protective nature around that object, and properties just another big, that's a very expensive notion to, so it is scary to think about people being on there having an accident and what would happen to you as the owner of the property.
Right. And right or wrong, as a 14-year-old, you get saddled with, well, he's a teenager, so he's probably not responsible.
And weapons, teenagers and weapons.
Smoking doobies.
That's right.
You just never know.
I think you could be an agent.
I should be.
You would be.
Maybe
I
have been.
Maybe Matt. So Andy, how often do you run into any issues when it pertains to like trespassing, but it's a situation where they had permission at one time, they got permission 20 years ago, and they just, they had a note from the landowner 20 years ago that they're holding on to, and then maybe there's a new landowner, or maybe the person that originally said yes 20 years ago just found out that they did it every year since and they didn't know anything about it. There's a lot of landowners that live in other states, and have a property, that they don't actually have eyes on every day. What kind of scenarios do you run into like that?
It happens all the time. I'd say if you ask most agents, trespassing complaints are one of our ones that we hate. A lot of times there's no good solution to it, but that happens all the time. And they'll say, yep, I have permission. And you start pinning them down. Well, when did you get permission? 20 years ago. Well, it's your fault. Just like that question you just had, at 14 years old, if you know that, hey, I need to go back, rebuild those relationships, ask again, that's something we tell people, you need to get permission every year. Because like you said, maybe the landowner changed, maybe they decide they don't want somebody out there. And so in Missouri, a lot of that responsibility falls on the landowner. If that landowner says, hey, I want them prosecuted, basically we have to prosecute them. And so they can take it to the prosecutor themselves, or we can do it for them. But again, also a lot of landowners just want us to be a bodyguard, and most of the time we refuse to do that. We don't come out and just to run people off. We'll help you if we need to come out. We'll come out. But I typically say, hey, look, this person didn't have permission to be here, and it's gotten a lot better. Most landowners now are saying, yeah, I want to prosecute. And so I think they think it protects them a little bit civilly as well.
What kind of burden of proof do you need to show that this person did trespass? Because obviously a he said, she said isn't going to work, I wouldn't think. And they could deny it all day long. Do you need trail camera? Do you need photos, videos? Like what kind of burden of proof do you have to say this person specifically was on my land?
Well, we're a little different in Missouri. For us, there's a kind of a caveat that it basically has to occur within our presence. But, if they say, hey, I've got 3 people out here deer hunting, and then I get out there and they've already made it out of the woods, but they're standing on the side of the road and they say, yeah, we were here, then that's fine. But yeah, you're going to have some type of evidence. I've had it on trail cameras or a lot of those cellular cameras now. That's where, in fact, I just went to trial on one last week, and it was all based on the cellular cameras hunting coons out of season. And that I was at my house, got a text from a guy, and says, hey, this guy's right now. And so it was 9:30 at night. So thankfully it's close to my house. I was able to throw on a uniform and get there and caught him. He was just up the road, but same deal. The camera is going to place him on the property, but you're going to need something. If it's just one person's version against the other, that's where that landowner, they can actually take it to the prosecutor themselves and say, hey, this is what I have. And it's up to the prosecutor whether they want to charge him with that or not. But most of the time it's occurring within our presence. We see it.
Yeah.
Got to catch those filthy hippies that have been camping out on my bourbon
property
cattle ranch down there.
Good luck. Squatters.
Yeah. They literally had a bindle. The guy had a straight up out of the 1930s, a hobo bindle over his shoulder. Just walked right through the bottom where the turkeys roost in the morning with his dog and his woman.
What more does he need in life? Nothing. He's got it all.
He's not paying taxes.
He's got a dog, a woman, and a bindle.
Probably some meth, but I don't judge. Speaking of judging, let's hop over to the Wildlife Words segment. It is brought to you by Hunter Specialties, purpose-driven tools for serious hunters. Okay, so bucks tend to lose their antlers based on the amount of daylight they're getting in late season, which ultimately impacts their hormones, triggering the act of shedding. But there's another factor that researchers believe may actually cause a deer to shed, and that is A, spending too much time on TikTok, B, losing a fight to a more dominant buck, C, having a dream about losing an antler, or D, getting startled by a clown or puppet.
Well, I feel like this one's pretty easy, but we always let our guests go first. Andy, which one do you think it is?
I'd say losing the fight to the buck, but I'm just going off of the other options.
Tim has to do that so I could get these right.
A is not real. C is not real.
I too go with B.
But it kind of depends on what the puppet is. I mean, you think of a good, like, scary little puppet.
Move along, Tim.
Or a clown. Yeah, there is research that shows that a buck's hormones may actually change after they lose a fight to a more dominant buck. If that happens in late season, the hypothesis is that, like, let's say you and I are sparring and you beat me out, something happens in my hormone, the chemicals that are coursing through my body, that causes that shed to happen shortly after. Sometimes
basically
it's
like public humiliation.
Like, here's your dunce cap.
You lost, and I'm taking your antlers.
Yep. It's crazy, but there's more and more evidence that's showing that's happening, which kind of reinforces that genetic, the pecking order, I guess, like in terms of who has the better genes in that.
It's interesting.
In that group of deer. So
now you know, Andy, if you didn't already.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
You're never going to get this hour back. I just want you to know that.
No, it's been fun.
Cool. Well, I guess any parting words of wisdom for hunters, just from a law enforcement perspective, before we wrap up here?
Not much. I mean, I think personally, a lot of stuff has changed. I think a lot of the stigma and the myths have been kind of dispelled a little bit. The only thing I could say is mainly, if you have a question, call us or text us. I prefer it to be during business hours, but here in Missouri, all of our calls come to our cell phone. So when I'm averaging 250, 300 calls a month, I don't like the call at 2:00 in the morning from the bar and they're settling the bet. So that's personally it. But I mean, honestly, I live in a rural community, so I know the vast majority of the people here in the county, and most of them know. I mean, they can call me or text me. I'd much rather just answer the question over the phone than for us to be in a bad position, because people just don't realize how awkward it is. That I don't want to write them a ticket, but when you're writing your kid's baseball coach or your kid's teacher or somebody from your church or something, it can ruin some relationships. So I'd much rather, that would be my advice. Just call us and ask us any question, and we'll work with you 100%. And it sure beats meeting in the field. So
yeah, good advice.
Yep, sounds good. All right.
Well, we appreciate your time today. Really, thank you very much. And if anything we can do to help you out, just holler.
Yeah, you bet.
You need someone to run someone down, rough them up a little bit?
That's Tim.
Let me know.
We'll get you set up.
Yeah, I want to ride along. Like, I want to be like a deputy for a day or something.
We've done that. So we had a coon dog at one of the guys on the Dre Outdoors team. He's a police officer at a local municipality here for a long time. He's retired now, but we did a ride along with him once because he was on dream season at the time, and we wanted to document kind of what each person on the team did for a living.
Sure.
And so we got to do a ride along with him. It was pretty good. Yeah.
I can only imagine riding along with coon dog.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Oh, sweet.
Anyways, well, thank you very much for your service. We appreciate it, and don't let people give you too much crap out there.
We'll try not. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Andy.
And everyone, thanks for watching. Stay tuned next week. It's episode number 248. So if that's not a tease, I don't know what is.
Let's just keeps going up.
Weird that way.
All right.
Numbers.
Till next time.
Bye-bye.
Peace out. Temperatures are going to be dropping. Perfect conditions for the skinny field.
Gotta focus on those afternoon hunts.
Northwest Tree Stand, 5 p.m.
It's the easiest decision you'll make this season. Get ahead of your game with DeerCast.
All right.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to jump on.
Hey, thanks for having us. We really appreciate it. It's been pretty nice. It was a lot better than I thought. I was afraid you're going to have to make me really reach back in my memory to come up with something.
What's your favorite color?
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV was brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's.